G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I wanted to do a video. It's actually a couple of days I did this over. The initial video is lead versus steel. And it goes to a discussion that I've heard a few times. And I think most people thoroughly understand this, but I think some people don't. And that is lead versus steel in the way of, will lead pass through steel? On the fundamentals that lead is a soft and malleable, heavy but soft and malleable metal, and steel is relatively hard. So when the two collide, the lead squishes. And in certain speeds that certainly happens, but it's actually a bit different than that. And what the truth of it is that it's about energy, or it's about speed and weight of the projectile, and then strength of the steel. So certainly the harder the steel and the stronger the steel and the thicker the steel, it can do more resisting. But equally, the heavier and the faster the lead, it can do more penetrating. There is an energy factor involved here, but it's also a little bit like a time factor, which means that in Newton's laws, there is that if you've got X amount of energy traveling at X speed, to stop it, to slow it down, to change its angle, you need X amount of strength to be able to resist that. So over here I have, well, I suppose I'll start off with, I use my 45-70 shooting this projectile, which is a 410 grain lead projectile. It's got a powder coat, just a paint essentially on the outside of it, to make it so it doesn't look like lead, but it is just lead projectile, so just a cast lead projectile. And over here we have a piece of 6mm, so 1/4 inch, not super thick. It's one of my targets, an earlier target, that bent a bit because it's only a low grade resistance or abrasion resistant steel. So it's a Bisley 50, so it's like a low grade armour. But still it's armour. It's not just mild steel, it's like Bisley 50. And here I have some holes I've put in it. Now, to start off with, these loads are set up, they're doing just a bit over 2,000 feet per second, 410 grains of lead. If you look closely, and we'll go through the images, this first one here, which is in the middle here, was at 25 yards.
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought it would do.
Yeah.
That's pretty close to centre, Sam.
It sure is, mate.
So that's just straight through.
Yep, no question.
And it cut through clean. So almost no marks on the outside of it, just cut straight through. The amount of strength, or the time it took to disperse that energy, the steel couldn't even compete at all, so it punched straight through. This, I went back to 50 yards.
Yep.
Should have maybe aimed to a different spot.
Yeah, maybe.
And you can see there, it still punched through without too much fuss, and I'll put some images on the back side there, but you can see it started to splatter the lead around the place. So some of the energy managed to be deflected, but it still punched straight through. I then moved away a little bit. Over here, this is 100 yards. You can see here it still punched through. It did more bending of the steel, and you probably will see, I'll have to look at the slow motion, even though it hit high, so there's less fulcrum with the hit, but you probably see more of the energy in the way of the steel actually moving. Then up here, this is at 200 yards. And we've got to where the steel had enough time, because the projectile slowed down enough. And yes, keep in mind they are very brick shaped, so they're not efficient at traveling through the air, but slowed down enough to where the air and the travel had used enough of the energy to where their steel then had enough time, because enough speed's been taken off. Really the only way that a projectile carries energy is through carrying speed. So as it loses speed, that's actually energy being washed off. And as you see, back at 200 yards, it managed to retain it. So the things of this little physics lesson, first off, is that because a metal's soft or hard isn't the most important thing when it comes to penetration. Yes, it gives it more strength, it gives it more ability to resist for longer, so it can potentially stop it going through, but it still comes down to the amount of energy or the speed and the weight of the projectile as to whether it's going to go through. As you can see, by looking at the slow-mo, up at 25 yards, when this punched straight through, very little energy was transferred to the whole plate. Most of it was just transferred to the impact, which brings me in another point, I'll get there in a minute, but cut straight through. And then when you come right back at, even though this is going to cause the least wobbling, the place where we hit at 200 yards, I think you'll find on the slow-mo you see obviously all of the energy was transferred into bending the plate and moving the plate. So there was less of it, but it was all transferred through. So the other bit I wanted to go through with the cutting through there is one of the things that you hear about occasionally, but it's not often mentioned, is what happens after, where that goes through. When it does punch through, where's that energy going? Well, you would only see a little bit on the footage, but we saw stuff that was traveling off up to 500 yards down the road there, whether it was the projectile going through or there's a nasty little hunk of metal that was going through that was still firing off there with a lot of energy at the back of it. So two things about that. One is there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of follow through even when it's gone through steel, but also is that it no longer is going in a consistent directory. It can go in any direction. It can really shoot off. You've got a little disc that was flying off there. You got the remains of the projectile, how much it's been hurt, or it's a whole projectile, but that's all flying off and it's no longer going to be stabilized and flying in a straight path. That can fly all over the place. So a bit of the safety lesson would be, just because you're the other side of a steel target and you're certain it's going to hit, doesn't mean you're in safe zone unless it is completely, well, it doesn't mean you're in safe zone. It's always the other side of it, regardless of what you think's in front of you. And for Hollywood and the sitting behind your car to get protection, yeah, this bit of steel here's probably got, unless you got the engine block in the road, this bit of steel's probably got 10 times the strength of a car. So no, it's not going to protect you. Anyway, that's about what I want to tell you today. The energy transfer, the punching through, that sort of stuff, but certainly when it comes back to the lead versus steel, no, just because it's soft doesn't mean it can't pass straight through strong steel. Anyway guys, hope that was some informative for you, or entertaining, or whatever you'd like to take out of that. Thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.